Peace and Pan-Africanism. I want to reflect on President Joe Biden's State of the Union address that he delivered this past Tuesday, March the 1st. I have a couple of thoughts about President Biden's State of the Union address that he delivered this past Tuesday, March the 1st. First of all, Joe Biden spoke for an hour. President Joe Biden spoke for roughly an hour. And during that hour, he never mentioned African. He never mentioned Black. He never mentioned African American. He never mentioned American African in the entire State of the Union address. He spent 15 minutes mentioning Ukrainians. He spent 15 minutes dedicated to the struggles of the Ukrainian people, but he did not mention Black people a single time in the entire State of the Union address. Now, this is the same man who went on the Breakfast Club and during a conversation with Charlemagne told Black people that if you don't vote for him, you are not Black. But in his State of the Union address this past Tuesday, he never bothered to mention Black people. But he did mention transgender. And he did mention that the U.S. Congress should pass the transgender equality bill. So he pushed the transgender agenda. And then he talked about women and women's issues. He pushed that. He talked about his Asian American bill. He pushed that. He talked about Native Americans. He pushed that. He talked about all other groups. He only left one out. He only left one group out, and that was you. I don't care what you call yourself. Negro Indian, African American, American African, Black people, you are not mentioned. The only times he mentioned the word Black was when he said, we need to support historically Black colleges. And before he could finish saying, we need to support historically Black colleges, your Democratic president added and community colleges. So he made it a point that even when he mentioned the word Black, which he did one time in the entire speech, and that was only when he said we need to support historically Black colleges, he wouldn't even give the Black colleges any undivided attention. He added community colleges in that same sentence, so HBCUs wouldn't think that they were special. So HBCUs wouldn't think that they were special. And it was hypocritical. It was very hypocritical for President Joe Biden to say we need to support historically Black colleges when he cut $43 billion from a $45 billion plan for HBCUs. Let me say that again. This same hypocrite who on Tuesday night said, we need to support historically Black colleges, cut $43 billion from a $45 billion HBCU spending proposal. So President Biden, how are you supporting historically Black colleges when you cut $43 billion from a $45 billion HBCU proposed budget, and then on top of that, you renamed HBCUs? You put them under a broader umbrella of minority-serving colleges and universities. So the $2 billion that you left, the crumbs from the Democratic table that you left, are not automatically guaranteed to go to HBCUs. They can go to any minority-serving college, or university. Very hypocritical. Very hypocritical. But that was the only time he mentioned the word black. He also mentioned Snow Bunny Supreme Court Justice nominee, Mrs. Ketanji Brown Jackson, who is married to a non-African. Isn't it ironic? Isn't it ironic that the three most prominent, don't say power, they have none. Don't say authority, they have none. Isn't it ironic that the three most prominent blacks in the U.S. government are all married to Caucasian spouses? Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas is married to George Bush's cousin. He has a white wife. Kamala Harris, the Vice President of the United States, is married to a white man. And now we have Ketanji Brown Jackson, first black female Supreme Court Justice. And just like the first black female Vice President, she has a white husband. Do you really think it's a coincidence? Do you really think it's a coincidence that your black Supreme Court Justice has a white wife? Your black Vice President has a white husband, and your soon-to-be black female Supreme Court Justice also has a white husband. Is that a coincidence? Of course it's not a coincidence. Of course it's not a coincidence. They were deliberately selected because they married into the white power structure. Clarence Thomas married into the white power structure. Kamala Harris married into the white power structure. Ketanji Brown Jackson married into the white power structure. And because Clarence Thomas's wife is a loyal European, and Kamala Harris's husband is a loyal European, and Ketanji Brown Jackson's husband is a loyal European, the white power structure knows that they can count on them to keep their Negro spouse in line. And if the Negro spouse gets out of line, they can be exposed. They can be exposed. They can be exposed. See, we talk about the spook who sat by the door. We always talk about the spook who sat by the door, but what about the European who sleeps with the house slave? We talk about the spook who sat by the door, but what about the European who sleeps with the house slave? We talk about the spook who sat by the door, but what about the European who sleeps with the house slave? Joe Biden upset a lot of black people when he said, we must hold the police accountable. And then he said, don't defund the police. We must fund the police. Joe Biden said, don't defund the police. We must fund the police. Your Democratic president said, don't defund the police. We must fund the police. I'm trying to understand how that statement supports his previous statement of holding the police accountable. Giving the police more money is not holding them accountable, President Joe Biden. It may be the case that when he said we must hold the police accountable, he looked in the faces of the members of Congress and they didn't seem too thrilled about President Biden talking about holding the police accountable, so he immediately went to Plan B. When he saw that statement did not garner any applause, he immediately went to Plan B and said, don't defund the police, fund the police. He said we need to give them more training. He said we need to give them more resources and we need to give them more money. He said we need to give the police more training, we need to give the police more money, and we need to give the police more resources. But President Biden, you all have been training the police since Dr. King's murder. You have been training and retraining and untraining the police since Dr. King's murder. Now, next month, in 30 days, we will celebrate 78, 88, 98, 08, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. 54 years since Dr. King was murdered, this coming April 4th. 54 years. You've been training the police. What new training tactic, what new training manual are you going to use to train the police? Let me explain something to all of you. Let me explain something to all of you. You cannot untrain racism. You cannot retrain bias. You cannot overtrain a bigot. Racism is a group system created to protect white domination of privilege, power, resources, and opportunities. The police's job is to protect the unfair advantage that white people have over Africans. The police, the purpose of the police growing out of slavery is to protect the unfair advantage that whites have over Africans. The police exists for the sole purpose of protecting the unfair accumulation by whites of power, opportunity, resource, and privilege. So, how are you going to train the police to be more just in dealing with black people when the purpose of the police is to oppress and intimidate black people away from fighting for freedom, justice, and equality? Police are supposed to be racist by white power structure definitions. Police are supposed to break the law by white power structure definitions. President Biden, what you need to understand, the defund the police movement was not always about the elimination of the police force. I never heard anyone say eliminate the police. I never heard anyone say eliminate the police. I never heard anyone say eliminate the police. I heard people say defund the police. There was never an eliminate the police movement. There was only a defund the police movement, President Biden, and the reason people called for a defund the police movement was so that necessary dollars could be redirected from the police to prevent and alleviate problems that make the police necessary in the black community. Let me say that again. The defund the police movement was not an eliminate the police movement. It was a movement to take some of the billions of dollars that y'all give police and redirect it towards the solving of problems that make police necessary in the black community. In other words, give us 20 million from the police and put them trade programs back in the inner city high schools so young black men and women don't have to sell dope. Let's take 20 million from the police and put meaningful mental health programs run by black people in the black community. So you don't have to call the police when somebody in your family is having a mental health crisis. We now have the dollars to put the appropriate programs in the community to address mental health issues. Let's take some of that money away from the police and alleviate poverty, because poor people are more likely to commit crime than wealthy and rich people. So the purpose of defunding the police was really the redirection of funds. The defund the police movement, President Biden, was really a redirection of funds to necessary systems and issues and programs in the black community that would reduce the need for the police. In other words, let's refund this money. Let's redirect this money away from the police budget to the black community So problems that often lead to police intervention can be eliminated. You eliminate the problem that leads to police intervention, and then you can reduce police brutality. But President Biden don't want to talk about that. President Biden don't want to talk about that. President Biden, you'd rather give out crack pipes. You'd rather give out crack pipes and safe smoking kits. No jobs. Nothing about unemployment. But Joe Biden didn't say a single word about any of the problems that affect black people during his State of the Union address. He didn't mention any of the problems that affect black people during his State of the Union address, but he found time to spend 15 of 61 minutes. He found time to spend 15 of 61 minutes talking about the Ukrainians. I heard about the loss of life in Ukraine, and I'm sorry to hear about the loss of human life anywhere in the world. But how can you spend 1/4 of your whole speech, 1/4 of your entire speech was spent sympathizing with war victims on another continent? 25% of the time allotted for your State of the Union address, a full 15 minutes, was spent sympathizing with war victims on another continent. But you have war victims on your continent. The American African is a war victim on your continent, and you didn't speak to a single issue that we are fighting right now. You mentioned Asians, you mentioned transgenders, you mentioned women, you mentioned Native Americans, you mentioned immigrants. You didn't mention black people one time, except when you said support the HBCUs. And we know that that was an irrelevant statement because you took $43 billion away from a $45 billion HBCU funding program. Train the police, fund the police, give them more resources. What more resources do the police need? What resource is going to bring back Breonna Taylor? What resource is going to bring back Tamir Rice? What resource is going to bring back Amir Pope? What resource is going to bring back Philando Castile and Eric Garner? What resource, what training are you going to give the police that's going to stop them from killing black people, Joe Biden? Nothing at all. Nothing at all. And what I found most interesting about your comments, President Joe Biden, what I found most interesting about your comments, President Joe Biden, you never once called on the U.S. Senate. You never once called on the U.S. Senate. You never once called on the U.S. Senate to pass the Emmett Till anti-lynching bill. You called on the U.S. Congress to pass the transgender equality bill. You yelled and shouted that out of your mouth during Tuesday night's State of the Union address. But you did not once call on the U.S. Senate to pass the Emmett Till anti-lynching bill. Why not, President Biden? Why not, President Biden? The House of Representatives have already passed the Emmett Till anti-lynching bill, but it is constantly being held up in the U.S. Senate. The House of Representatives have already passed the Emmett Till anti-lynching bill, but the U.S. Senate has yet to back them up and sign it into law. The U.S. Senate constantly keeps on filibustering the Emmett Till anti-lynching bill. Why didn't President Joe Biden, why didn't your Democratic president call on the U.S. Senate to stop holding up the Emmett Till anti-lynching bill and call on the U.S. Senate to pass the Emmett Till anti-lynching bill? Why couldn't he say that? Why couldn't he say that? Why couldn't he say that? In fact, let me ask the Congressional Black Caucus. Let me speak to the 57 members of the Congressional Black Caucus. Let me speak. Can I ask you 57 Negroes a question? Can I ask you 57 Negroes a question? Why couldn't you make President Biden, in his State of the Union address, call on the U.S. Senate to vote and approve the Emmett Till anti-lynching bill? Congressional Black Caucus, you couldn't do that. You 57 Negroes went to the black community and begged us to vote him in. You went to the black community and begged us to vote President Biden in. And you have yet to make him do anything for black people. Hold the police accountable, President Biden. Hold the police accountable. Well, if you want to hold the police accountable, why didn't you call for the passage of the George Floyd Police Accountability Act? If you want to hold the police accountable, why didn't President Joe Biden call on the U.S. Congress to pass the George Floyd Police Accountability Act? Why, Joe? You talked about transgender equality, but you don't talk about Emmett Till anti-lynching. You talked about transgender equality, but you don't talk about the George Floyd Police Accountability Act. Now, here's a question for the Congressional Black Caucus. Here's a question for the Congressional Black Caucus. Did the Congressional Black Caucus send President Biden a letter of disappointment following his State of the Union address? I'm going to ask you again. Did the Congressional Black Caucus send the President of these United States a letter of disappointment following Tuesday night's State of the Union address? Because if the Congressional Black Caucus did not send President Biden a letter of disappointment, if you did not express disappointment to the President of these United States, then you are complicit. The black community is holding all 57 members of the Congressional Black Caucus complicit in Biden's negligence towards the black community. It's as simple as that. I listened to that whole speech. And I am not surprised that Joe Biden ignored black people. And a lot of this is our fault. And the reason a lot of this is black America's fault is Joe Biden was Barack Obama's vice president. Joe Biden was Barack Obama's vice president. Joe Biden was Barack Obama's vice president. So Joe Biden saw firsthand, closer than anyone in the country, how black people stood by and let Barack Obama ignore them for 8 years. Joe Biden saw better than anyone in the country. He was in the Oval Office with the president, and he saw how black people let Barack Obama ignore their problems for 8 years. And after watching black people give Barack Obama a free pass for 8 years, Joe Biden said, if Barack Obama don't have to do nothing for black people, I damn sure don't have to do nothing for black people. Joe Biden said, I watched Barack Obama ignore you all. He ignored you and y'all said nothing about it. Al Sharpton told y'all to leave Barack Obama alone. Al Sharpton told black America to give Barack Obama a pass, and that's exactly what black America did. They gave Barack Obama a pass, and now President Joe Biden is saying, how can you hold me accountable if you didn't hold him accountable? If Barack Obama didn't have to serve black people, neither do I. That's what he should have said. I could have respected that. He should have said that Tuesday night during his State of Black America speech. He should have said, I watched you all let Obama ignore you for 8 years. So if Obama can ignore you for 8 years, I can too. That's what he should have said. So black people, we created this. We created Joe Biden. You conditioned him to ignore you by letting Obama ignore you. He did not mention the Emmett Till anti-lynching bill. He did not mention the George Floyd Police Accountability Bill. But you know what he did mention? If I'm not mistaken, he did mention the John Lewis Voting Act and the Freedom to Vote Act. Here we go again. Here we go again. The John Lewis Voting Act, rest in peace to John Lewis. I met him once in Atlanta. The John Lewis Voting Act and the Freedom to Vote Act. Now, black people, before you start thinking that this act is about you, I want you to understand that the John Lewis Voting Act and the Freedom to Vote Act is not about helping black people. It's about making sure white people can get your votes when they need them. Let me say this again. Let me say this again. The John Lewis Voting Act and the Freedom to Vote Act has nothing to do with helping black people. It's about making sure your votes can go to white people as necessary on election day. Those are not about us. All these voting bills are about white candidates exploiting the black vote. None of these bills are about helping black people. I've told you before, and I'm going to tell you again. I've told you before, and I'm going to tell you again. If voting could change anything in black America, if voting could change anything in the Caribbean, if voting could change anything in Africa, if voting could change anything in Canada or Australia, if voting could change anything in Central or South America, if voting could change anything for any group of black people in the world, voting would be illegal. You will never get nothing through a vote. You have never got nothing through a vote. Everything you got, you paid a blood tax for it. You paid a blood tax to get out of slavery. You paid a blood tax to end segregation. You paid a blood tax to desegregate the public schools. You paid a blood tax to get out of Jim Crow. And you will always pay a blood tax for anything that you want. Voting has never changed nothing for black people, and it never will. The John Lewis Voting Act. I thought the 14th Amendment, if the 14th Amendment applies to black people, if the 14th Amendment applies to black people, if the 14th Amendment applies to black people, why did you need a Voting Rights Act in 65? Why did you need a Civil Rights Bill in 64? Why do you need a John Lewis Voting Rights Act in 2022? And why do you need a Freedom to Vote Act in 2022? See, you can't have it both ways. You can't have it both ways. America can't have it both ways. Either the 14th Amendment applies to black people, or the Dred Scott case applies to black people. Which one? It can't be both. Because according to constitutional lawyers, according to constitutional scholars, the 14th Amendment automatically rendered impotent the Dred Scott decision. So if the 14th Amendment automatically outlawed the Dred Scott decision, why do you have to pass special acts for black people? So I ask you, President Biden, I ask you, U.S. Supreme Court, I ask you, U.S. Congress, which rule governs the African in America? It's either the 14th Amendment or the Dred Scott decision. It's either the 14th Amendment or the Dred Scott decision, but you can't say both because those two cannot coexist at the same time for black people. Either the Dred Scott decision applies to black people or the 14th Amendment applies to black people. The Dred Scott decision says black people have no rights. The Dred Scott decision says black people have no rights that the white man must respect. Black people have no rights that the white man must respect. Chief Justice Roger B. Taney, who rendered the Dred Scott decision, also said that any law that contradicts the intent of the slave-holding white supremacist founding fathers of America, Chief Justice Roger Taney, who handed down the Dred Scott case, said that any law that contradicts the intent of the slave-holding racist founding fathers of the United States, any law that contradicts the intent of the founding fathers of the United States is automatically null and void. He said that when the Constitution of the United States was written, it did not intend to ever treat black people or as citizens. I'm going to say it again. Chief Justice Roger B. Taney of the U.S. Supreme Court in Dred Scott 1857 said, the Constitution, the founding fathers never intended black people to be considered citizens of this country, and therefore, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, Benjamin Rush, Alexander Hamilton, they never intended black people to be citizens of this country. And according to Supreme Court Justice Roger B. Taney, we have no rights that the white man has to respect. And that would explain why you need a civil rights bill. That would explain why you need a school desegregation. That would explain why you need a Voting Rights Act. That would explain why you need a John Lewis Voting Rights Act. So I asked Biden and I asked the Supreme Court, Miss Ketanji Brown Jackson and Clarence Thomas, Miss Ketanji Brown Jackson and Clarence Thomas, which one is it? Does the 14th Amendment protect African people? Or does the Dred Scott decision? Is the Dred Scott decision still valid? It can't be both. Because if the 14th Amendment applies to black people, why do we need extra bills? If the 14th Amendment applies to black people, why do we need extra bills and laws? The 14th Amendment says equal protection. So if we have equal protection, why do you need the John Lewis Voting Rights Act? Why do you need the John Lewis Voting Rights Act? Do y'all get my point? Either we're citizens or we're not. I already know the answer to that. We are not. I already know the answer to that. We are not. Okay? Because if you were a citizen of these United States, the United States Army could not target you, okay, as a subversive community. The U.S. military is designed to fight non-citizens. The U.S. military is not designed to police its own citizens. So the mere fact that the U.S. Army intelligence spied and undermined the most honorable Marcus Garvey, the fact that the U.S. Army Office of Intelligence spied on the most honorable Marcus Garvey and helped undermine him, the U.S. Army Office of Intelligence, Military Information Department, spied on Booker T. Washington at Tuskegee. Robert Moulton, Booker T's vice principal, was a member of the Military Intelligence Department of the U.S. Army, sent to Tuskegee to spy on Booker T. U.S. Army intelligence helped set up Dr. King's murder. So you got to understand something. Before J. Edgar Hoover took over the FBI in 1924, before J. Edgar Hoover took over the FBI in 1924, and it was not FBI, it was Department of Justice, Bureau of Information. Department of Justice, Bureau of Investigation. Then it became the FBI. But before the FBI became what it is today, the U.S. Army, Office of Intelligence, Military Information Department, they were the original FBI. The U.S. Army was the original FBI. That's why the backup shooters for Dr. King's murder, the backup shooters for Dr. King's murder were 8 Green Beret Army officers. 8 Green Beret Army officers were the backup killers on April 4th, 1968, Memphis, Tennessee, Divine Lorraine Hotel. If the FBI failed, the U.S. Army would step in. If the FBI failed, the U.S. Army would step in. And to my NAACP members, to my NAACP members, to my NAACP members, I hate to tell you this. I know it's going to hurt your heart. To my NAACP members, I hate to say this because I know it's going to hurt you. But Joel Spingarn, who was chair of the NAACP, for whom the most important award in the history of the NAACP is named the Spingarn Medal. Joel Spingarn, guess what? Joel Spingarn was an officer in the Military Information Department of the U.S. Army, and his job was to spy on black leaders, black churches, and black organizations while he was the chair of the NAACP. If you think I'm lying, do your own research. If you think I'm lying, do your own research. If you think I'm lying, do your own research. I'm going to say it again. Joel Spingarn of the NAACP, a white man who was the most powerful and influential chair of the NAACP in the history of the organization. The Spingarn Medal is named after him. The Spingarn Medal is named after him. Joel Spingarn was an agent and an officer in the U.S. Army's Military Information Department, and his job was to spy on black organizations, black churches, and black leaders. And he gave the U.S. Army information about the black leaders who belong to the NAACP. If you think I'm wrong, do your research. If you think I'm wrong, do your research. The NAACP is a front organization for the U.S. military and the Rockefellers. I said the NAACP is a front organization for the U.S. military and the Rockefellers. I said the NAACP is a front organization for the U.S. military and the Rockefellers. For my Pan-Africanists out there, for my Pan-African socialists, I know this is going to hurt your heart. For my Pan-African socialists, what I'm about to say is going to hurt your heart. But Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois, Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois, Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois, one of the greatest black scholars in modern history, the modern father of the study of black sociology, the father of Pan-African socialism, according to the evidence, it is highly likely, according to the evidence, it is highly likely, but not conclusive, that W.E.B. Du Bois was also an agent under Joel Spingarn for the Military Information Division of the U.S. Army. That's right. That's right, Pan-African socialists. That's right, Pan-African socialists. That's why I'm a Pan-African nationalist. That's why I'm a Pan-African nationalist. That's why W.E.B. Du Bois, according to the evidence, it's not 100% conclusive, but W.E.B. Du Bois, according to the evidence, was also an agent for the Military Information Department of the U.S. Army. And now you know why. Now you know why the U.S. Department of State sent Du Bois to Liberia to disrupt Marcus Garvey's nation-building program. Now you know why the U.S. Department of State sent W.E.B. Du Bois to Liberia to disrupt Marcus Garvey's nation-building program. Now you know why the U.S. Department of State sent W.E.B. Du Bois to Liberia to disrupt Marcus Garvey's nation-building program, because W.E.B. Du Bois, like R.R. Moton, like Joel Spingarn, were agents of the Military Information Department of the U.S. Army. And if there's anybody who doubts what I'm saying, May 3rd, 1917, do your research. May 3rd, 1917, do your research. May 3rd, 1917, do your research. On May 3rd, 1917, the Military Information Department, Military Intelligence Department of the U.S. Army created a black spy network. I'm going to say it again. The black spy network of the U.S. Army was formally created on May the 3rd of 1917, 1 year after Marcus Garvey arrived in New York City. Garvey shows up in March of 1916. The Most Honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey shows up in March of 1916, and on May the 3rd, 1917, the Black Spy Network of the U.S. Army's Military Intelligence Division was created. If you don't believe me, do your research. Nothing I'm telling you, you can't get in the library. Nothing I'm telling you, you can't get from Freedom of Information documentation. We have agents in the black community. We have agents in the black community. The FBI is only part of your problem. The U.S. Army is another part. Who funded and resourced the police departments against the Black Panther and Black Liberation Army? Who funded and resourced the inner city police departments against the Black Liberation Army and the Black Panther Army of the 1960s? It was the U.S. military. The U.S. military, not just the FBI. The U.S. military, not just the FBI, is an enemy of African people. And this is why you've heard your brother say, and this is why you've heard your brother say on so many occasions, if a black organization is funded by the oppressor, I can't be bothered with it. If a black leader is funded by the oppressor, I can't be bothered with it. If a black politician is funded by the oppressor, I can't be bothered with it. If a black church is funded by the oppressor, I can't be bothered with it. That's why the Most Honorable Marcus Garvey, that's why Mosiah the Great refused to take a penny from another race. Because the hand that pays is the hand that rules. And anybody taking money from non-African sources, except for labor under employment, meaning you work a job to get paid, that don't make you no agent. You go to work every day, that don't make you no agent. But if you claim to be about black liberation, if you claim to be about black liberation and you taking money from non-African sources, you are an agent, even though you don't know it. If a black church taking money, you are agent. Black organization taking money, you are agent. Black politician taking money, you an agent. You just don't know it yet. I give you a homework assignment. Go look at the donors to Al Sharpton's National Action Network. Go look at the donations to Al Sharpton's National Action Network. Go look at the donations to Jesse Jackson's Rainbow Coalition. Go look at the donations to the NAACP. Go look at the donations to the Urban League. Follow the money, not the message. Follow the money, not the message. Follow the money, not the message.